Hello, and welcome to Shelf Life from the Virginia Festival of the Book. I'm Sarah Lawson, Associate Director of the Virginia Center of the Book, a program of Virginia Humanities. Thanks for joining us. A couple notes before I hand the program over to our speakers. First, please share your questions using the Q&A tab on Zoom at any time during the event. Also, we have optional closed captioning, which you can turn on and customize at any time with the Closed Captions tab at the bottom of your window. If you haven't already read today's books, we hope you will. For details about how to buy them from a local bookseller or check on a copy from your library, visit vabook.org, where you can also explore our upcoming schedule and watch past events. While you're there, please consider making a donation to support the festival's ongoing work at vabook.org/give. Now, I'm pleased to introduce today's speakers. Emily Henry, author of People We Meet on Vacation, also wrote Beach Read, as well as several young adult novels. She lives and writes in Cincinnati and the part of Kentucky just beneath it. Libby Hubscher, author of Meet Me in Paradise, lives in North Carolina with her husband, 2 young children, and a menagerie of pets. She writes women's fiction and contemporary romance. And Priscilla Oliveras, author of Anchored Hearts and Summer in the City, writes contemporary romance with a Latinx flavor. Her work has garnered praise and starred reviews from the Washington Post, the New York Times, Entertainment Weekly, and Oprah Magazine, among many others. Thank you so much for joining us for Shelf Life. Tell us more about your new summer romance novels.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. Hola, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, everybody.
We can go ahead and get started. I think we're all just so excited to see each other and chat. I'm kind of like a little verklempt, just like, where do I start? There's so much I want to say.
Yeah. And so we have things that we know we've talked about and want to talk about in this conversation, but also really early on, we wanted to just let everyone know who's tuning in. You can put in your questions in the Q&A function, and we will get to as much stuff as we can get to.
Yes. So please, yeah, if you have a burning question or while we're chit-chatting, if something comes up, use that chat function. And all 3 of us, one of us will be eyeing it to see. So we have a couple questions already, and we will say that some of us thought about reading, but then we just thought an hour can go by so quickly, and we wanted it to be a little bit more interactive. If you have questions, and frankly, I've been cooped up inside the house for a long time, so I'm just excited to talk to people. So we have some questions that we'll get started, and then really just keep it casual conversation. I think one of the first ones that we talked about, and either one of you ladies can jump in first, was about researching. Even though we are writing contemporary romance novels, so I've had people say, really, what do you have to do for research if it's contemporary, unlike an historical, really? But there is still a lot of research involved with our books. So was there some kind of fun fact or something that you learned while you were researching either Meet Me in Paradise or People We Meet on Vacation, and then did that actually make it in the book? Because if you're like me, I can spend hours going down this black hole, and I've learned a lot about surgeries for Alejandro's fractured leg, and not all of that kind of went in the book. So did that happen with either one of you ladies, or something interesting that you want to share?
Yeah, do you want to go first, Emily?
Sure. I mean, if you need time to, yeah. So like you were saying, Priscilla, it's really weird how much research you have to do for just these weird little things that you don't think about until you're writing. And it's also always gutting when you have to cut it, when your editor's nobody needs to know this information. You're well, they're put 3 hours of my life for no reason, but you're right. But I think as writers, even when you're writing in a contemporary setting, it's so much of what you're writing needs to be informed by true knowledge, whether you put that into the book or not, because just little mistakes slip in if you haven't taken the time to do that research. For People We Meet on Vacation, the characters go on 11 vacations throughout the course of the book. And all of those places were places I'd traveled, so I was able to just confirm little details. But the one exception was the main trip. There's 2 storylines, and one storyline takes place entirely in Palm Springs. And I wrote it thinking I would be able to go to Palm Springs and double check all those facts. I haven't been since I was a child. And of course, then COVID hit, and that wasn't an option. But it was really funny, how easy it was in a way to get some of these very specific details like there that did make it into the book. Like there's like a desert zoo rehab facility that has a carousel, and in the summer the carousel either is not open, I can't remember if it's not open at all or if it closes at a certain time of day because the metal gets so hot. And there are little things like that you don't really know unless you take the time to go and try things out, or you find very dedicated travel bloggers to confirm little details. So there's a lot of just little stuff like that. But I don't know if you guys relate to this, but I feel like sometimes the things that make it into the book that seem like the weirdest or most out there are, I feel like almost always based on things that happened in real life or that you like found, anecdotally someone this happened to, whatever. And you're always going to get the comment of like, that's too out there, that wouldn't happen. And it's always the thing that you're like, that happened to me.
Yeah. Or interesting that you said travel bloggers, because I've used travel bloggers for Angry Hearts. I've lived there and I visited there a lot, so that helped. But for like for a holiday anthology, I've never spent like the holidays in Chicago as much as I would like to. So I was Googling holiday events, holiday dates, and I came across like there's an ice skating rink that they now have outside of Wrigley, like an outdoor one that I've never been to, but there was a travel blogger that had been several times, like with their kids. And so she had pictures and she was talking about, like in detail, and so that really helped a lot, like a lot of that. And I was able to visualize then based on her pictures and other descriptions for the book. What about for you, Libby?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, so I wrote almost the entire book of Meet Me in Paradise takes place on the island of Saba, and I've never been there.
Cool.
So that was something that I did a lot of research about, and travel bloggers are amazing. Also, like I even looked at Yelp to see like about the restaurants on the island, and
that's good.
Like, being able to see pictures, I think, is so helpful when you're trying to describe things and know like the setting.
Yeah.
But the fun thing was, I just kind of generally like to learn about a place, and I go down a rabbit hole. And one of the cool things about Saba is that there are a lot of artists who live there. And I just happened to like stumble upon, when I was researching, the lace that they make on the island, and that there are actual like books of patterns and stuff. And all of that ended up being a really important part of the story. But I found it totally organically. It wasn't like I originally had this idea like lace is going to be a part of this book.
Right.
So that was really fun to learn about. And the coolest thing was a reader actually sent me a message and said that like someone in their family had actually had a pattern included in a book. And it was the book that I had found. So I just thought that was so amazing to be able to like make that connection, because it's a very small island. Not that many people live there. So that was really cool.
What like a small world moment, right? How that connection. Oh, that's really cool.
That was really incredible.
Are you now planning to take that trip? Or I mean, not the same exact trip, but are you planning to go to the island? Or are you hoping to now that you have all that? Yeah.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to go there. It seems like the most amazing place, and all the people who've been there or who lived there, who read the book, just kind of reinforce that for me. Like they're like, oh, everyone is so nice, and it is such like a close community. So yeah, I would definitely like to go there and visit. I think it's like at the top of my list probably of places to go.
Well, I'm hoping that you'll get to sometime soon post a picture on Instagram of you and Meet Me in Paradise, like on the island. That'll be so cool.
That would be amazing. Yeah. I know like a bookstagrammer actually went to, I think it was St. Martin, and took a picture of like Saba off in the distance, which was really cool. But I think they're still locked down there, so because it's so small. But hopefully in the future, that would be really cool.
Well, for me, I did, because my Keys to Love series is set in like book 1 and 2. And so before book 1, I went down, normally I'm going down to Key West, like just to visit people or things like that. But I went specifically for a research trip because one of my high school friends is one of like, there are 5 brothers, but 4 of them are all firefighter paramedics. And so that's kind of where I kind of got the idea. I knew I wanted to set a book there. And so Eric, the brother that's my grade that I grew up with, was able to set up for me to spend a day visiting and like 2 different firehouses in Monroe County, so like in Key West. And so I got to do ride-alongs, and in Anchored Hearts, there's a scene where Alejandro, shows up at the fire station, and and Ana Maria is just finishing like doing like some exercising, like some drills. And so that idea came to me because the second firehouse that I was at on Stock Island, they let me dress up, and then they were doing like their exercise drills, like carrying like these huge buckets of water and trying to like push over that big tire. And oh my gosh, it was so hard being all dressed up, and then you had the air the oxygen tank on your back. I was just so amazed at all that they can do. But so that research did make it in the book, and I did get to talk with, there is a female firefighter paramedic there, Daniela, that I got to spend a lot of time talking with her that afternoon, and she was good inspiration for Ana Maria. But Google, I rely on so much, like the internet and satellite maps, and to kind of, I feel like, and you does it the same with you? Like, even though like there's those hours of research that don't get on the page, it does help me kind of be like, get inside the character and kind of see what they will see, and so it does help, with the, with the book, even if like the actual facts or whatever aren't on the page.
For sure. I mean, when you were talking about seeing that firefighter doing the drills and trying the drills, that scene in your book is so memorable to me and so vivid. And it's interesting that that's something that you had that personal, like firsthand experience with, because it's like, looking back, it's like, I mean, I guess it's a pivotal scene as far as like character development. You like get to know her so much better just watching this play out. But at the same time, it's like, it's just sort of a world building scene. And it's still so vivid in my mind, even all these months after reading Anchored Hearts.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. So we've talked about research. How about I guess, like, I think another question that we had talked about was characters. And is there either in this book, so like in Meet Me in Paradise, or People We Meet on Vacation, is there one character that you identified more than the other? Or in another book, is there one? Or has there been? Because Libby, you have another one coming out soon, or I'm not sure when. Yeah,
I do actually. I just like revealed the cover for it today. So my next one comes out next March. It's called If You Ask Me, and it's about an advice columnist, but it's set in North Carolina, and I feel like the main character in that is a lot like has a lot of traits that I have. I think I try to pick like, honestly, an issue like that I have personally and work it out in each book.
Hey, therapy, that's smart.
So there's always like that kind of alignment. In Meet Me in Paradise, so for people who don't know, the story is about 2 sisters who are very different people, and kind of, they had a tragic event in their childhood, and they both sort of responded to it differently. And one of them is very adventurous, and the other one is very, very cautious and stays at home and is kind of more of a like maternal worrier sort of character. And she gets to go out of her comfort zone and go on this trip that's really life-changing for her. And I think like I am definitely a worrier, so I really identify with Marin. Because that's her main thing, is she's kind of cautious. And what prompted me to write the book was that I was thinking about like the lives we haven't lived, kind of like, if you haven't done a lot of things you've wanted to do because you've been afraid or nervous about what might happen or what might go wrong. And I was trying to work through that, like, well, what if everything went wrong anyway and you still did those things? Like, what could that look like? So I really do kind of identify with her, although she's still quite different from me. But yeah.
I think it's funny that you say she gets to go on a trip, because she's like pushed to go on the trip.
Yes, she is like
kicking and screaming to go on the trip. So
right,
so
like, those life events force us, or other people force us. In that case, for little sister, it sends her. So
I loved, I don't want to give anything away, but I just love what happens when Marin gets on the plane, and how her younger sister is I don't want to say sneaky, because it's in a good way, but she's is a very good planner. I will just say that. Throughout Marin's book, she's wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really love her. I wish I was more like her, actually.
Yes. Same here. I think I would identify more with Marin in of the two sisters. What about you, Emily?
Yeah, I really relate to what Libby was saying with like kind of taking an issue and then working it out with each book. And so every time I write a book, I think afterward, I feel like, oh, that character is the most like me of anyone that I've written. And then I do it again, and every time. And even with, my two leads, it's always like people, I don't know if you guys get asked this question a lot, but I get asked a lot, like, which of the two leads specifically do you relate to more? And it's so weird because I always feel like I'm just dividing up my traits between two characters. And I think people in real life are so much more complex, and we wouldn't really make very good characters because we would keep doing things that didn't seem like logical for like our character development, and just very changeable and fluid, especially based on who you're with at that time. Like the dynamic, I think, brings out different parts of you. But for people we meet on vacation, I really, really, really do relate to Poppy so much. I think especially when I was younger, I was a lot like her, and I've kind of mellowed a little bit. But when I was younger, I was very much just kind of always on and like loud, chaotic, just like kind of desperate for attention. And the thing that I was working out though with that book was really the idea of like having pursued this dream, specifically in this situation, publishing, pursuing this dream for the length of my whole life so far, basically. Like I knew I wanted to write when I was 8 years old. And so getting to that point and then having kind of the come down of meeting these big life goals and kind of getting your dream and realizing like you're still just you and your life is just your life, and it doesn't fulfill all of these like holes in you or heal all of these wounds. It really is just like a really good job. And so with Poppy, even though she's a writer, but she's a travel writer, I knew from the beginning that was sort of what her emotional arc was going to be about. It was going to be about someone who had achieved these goals that they set for herself when she was very young, and have just kind of accumulated and built the life that she thought she wanted, and realizing that didn't fix everything or fulfill her or bring her purpose or even really contentment. And I just kind of wanted to see what she would do with that, because with Beach Read, my first book, I was doing the same thing with writer's block. I had writer's block, and I just kind of wanted to know, like, how do I stop having writer's block? And so for this one, it really was just like, I just want to explore this feeling of like kind of emptiness that comes with having fulfilled your greatest goal, and just thinking like, what now? Like, what do I dream about, and what do I fill up my life with?
That's so interesting. I think how we both, I think for me, similar in a way, as far as I think, especially in a lot of my heroines in the books, there's always like a trait either that I wish was stronger in me, or that I wish I even had, right? That they have that I admire. I would say with Ana Maria, and I realized we jumped in and we didn't even like give our blurbs of like what our books were about. We just like, I was like so excited to start talking. I was like, let's chat. But so with Ana Maria, it's a second chance at romance. They were high school sweethearts, and they thought they would graduate and go see the world together. And he did, because he had a big rift with his father, and Alejandro never came back. Ana Maria stayed because her father was ill at the time and never left to go meet him. So I think a part of me that identifies with Ana Maria is she's happy with her life, but she has a goal that she has wanted. She's a firefighter paramedic, like her all three of her siblings and their puppy, their dad. But she's also has a side hustle, a nutritionist, like certified nutritionist, and a personal trainer, and she wants to build that business. But she's just kind of been treading water, like settling with, I'm happy, and this is my place here with my family, and taking care, of others, and kind of waiting and not realizing that she's like waiting for, is it Alejandro? Is it what is she waiting for? And when the book opens, she has decided to finally start, pursuing, her goal. And I think her character arc, both of them that they have to go through, is learning that you can have what you really want. You can pursue your goals and still be supportive of like your partner or your loved one. And it's okay if your goals are going in this way, as long as you make the time to come back, and so that part of me, I think I relate to that. Like, even my girls I have 3 daughters that are now all off adulting, and they have said, recently, like, Mom, you've raised us, and you put other stuff on hold, like, to raise us, and like, now is your time, to pursue what you've always wanted to really pursue. Because I wrote while they were home, but around while they were home and stuff.
Right.
And so I think that part of her, like, going for it, is what I've been trying to do since I finally started publishing.
Yeah, and I think that's so interesting, because I just listening to both of you speak, it feels like all 3 of us are sort of writing what I've been thinking of as like coming of age love stories, where it's like, I didn't know that in adulthood you would still have coming of ages. No one prepared me for that. And in talking about people we meet on vacation so much, in the last few weeks, I've really realized, like, I wrote that book when I was like approaching 30 or newly 30, and my parents were in their early 60s. And I was watching everyone that I'd kind of grown up with have this second coming of age, where it was just sort of that, like, am I happy with my life? Do I want something else? Like, should I just kind of settle into what's working?
Mm-hmm.
But I was also watching my parents in their early 60s doing the same exact thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like very eye-opening to me, to realize as a kid, you kind of just think you become an adult and then that's who you are.
Yeah.
And then as an adult, you're like, oh no, it's happening again. Like, what if I want something different? What if I want to live somewhere else? What if I want a different job?
Yeah.
Whatever. And just kind of renegotiating your identity and leaving room to grow. And it's so interesting that, all 3 of us have main characters who are adults,
Right.
who are like, here you go. It's time to change. It's time to adapt and like let this new part of yourself in.
Yeah, it's really true. Like, a bracelet that I'm going to totally butcher their quote, but it's like, it's never too late to be who you want to be, right? Or to do what it is that you want to do. And that's what's happening in all of our stories. There are a couple questions in the Q&A. Libby, I'll throw it to you first. But what is your best trick for beating writer's block? Mary McCoy wants to know.
I have one.
You do? Yeah.
And it's really, really ridiculous. And I saw it on Twitter a long time ago, I think. And so I don't know who to attribute this to, but it is to change the font. So I don't know why I change it to comic, like, is it Comic Sans? It looks completely ridiculous. And there's something about it that just takes the pressure off. It's like, I'm just writing something ridiculous and it feels fun. And for whatever reason, I think that helps me, because usually when I have writer's block, it's because I'm not able to drown out like all of my internal critic or the external critic I've internalized. And so I'm just sitting there being like, this is not good. This doesn't sound good. This isn't good writing. And then it's like, once I change it to that, it's like, who cares? I don't know why, but it works for me. So that's like my go-to trick. I'm sure there's other things, like refilling my creative well and just going out and seeing new things and stuff. But that's the one that I always try first.
I was going to say go for a run, but I'm going to try that, changing the font first.
That's way easier.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah.
Hardcore.
Going for a run helps me, or a walk, or a hammock.
Yeah. A hammock.
Yeah. But the font. Emily, what do you do?
Yeah, I think that's so funny, because I wonder how common all of these are. I would try not to run if I ever could avoid it, but I do go for walks a lot. I haven't done the font thing, but I do something very similar that I just kind of fell into by accident, which is when I get to a point where it's just not happening anymore, I will finally like set my computer aside and I will leave my phone inside, and I'll go outside, and sometimes I'll take a notebook with me, or sometimes I'll just go sit outside, and after a minute I'm like, you know what, I have something I could write down as like a possible solution. And so I'll grab my notebook and start writing. And I think it's the same thing. It's like when I'm typing on my computer, it's like, this is official. This must be a part of a book. This needs to make sense. But when I've set that aside and been like, okay, I'm done for the day, a lot of the time, if I grab my notebook and go outside and don't have any like digital distractions, it will just sort of happen. But then I also think on a bigger scale, I've sort of had like a personal revelation this year of realizing, like, I feel like I have writer's block almost every single day that I sit down to write. And I've realized that it's just like anxiety, it's just dread, it's fear of it not being good enough. It's those, it's all the usual things. But I think what I've realized is that when you let the fear of failure stop you from writing, you're just guaranteeing failure. Like, if you're not writing, you're already failing. So if you write something bad, you're already like a step above that. And so just every day when I sit down to write and have that kind of pit of dread in my stomach, I just really do remind myself, like, that fear is not helpful. It's a protective instinct, but it's not actually protecting you. It's keeping you from what you want, which is to write this book. And so that gives me permission to write a very bad scene. And even if I don't know what's going to happen, I just write anyway. And that usually means, like, I send my characters to the grocery store a lot and it all gets edited out later. But if I don't know what to do, I'm like, okay, they'll go to the grocery store, they'll take a walk, we'll see who they run into. And so a lot of that gets cut. But if I push through and kind of just high ground in the story, eventually I usually hit on a point of conflict or tension or something that actually could be a part of a story.
Yeah. For me, some kind of motion, like, I realized I'm a plotter. So I usually like know kind of what scene is coming next. And if I try to sit down in front of like a blank screen and just go like with off the top of my head, then you can come back in an hour later and there's going to be still a blank screen and with nothing on the top of my head. But so like if I finish a scene, even if I'm like not at my word count or if I still have time to write, it's usually part of my writing process is to step away from the laptop, even if it's, gosh, go do the dishes, right? But I would prefer to walk around the neighborhood, but doing something that's mindless so that my mind, then I'm kind of like just playing over, okay, what scene is next and why does the character need to do that, right? And what are they hoping, like, so go over that like goal, motivation, conflict, and talk with the character, kind of like have conversations with whoever the point of view character is, like, to make sure I understand why they think they need to do whatever they're going to go do, so that the scene becomes like a little bit like a movie in my head, and then I can sit down and then it comes a little bit more. But if I'm trying to force it on nothing's really going to come out, and then I'll just get more frustrated. But to help with those, like that imposter syndrome, those doubts, this year, my word for the year is positivity. So I'm trying to do like more positive self-talk, less, you suck talk. And so I have like a positive mantra that I write on my planner every day, and they're actually on sticky notes, like on the wall above my desk right here. So they really help, like, because I can look up right here and it says, I believe in myself, I can accomplish anything. And then like, soy invencible, I'm invincible. So I'll just look at those and repeat them to myself to kind of like psych myself out, kind of like a locker room pep talk.
Yes, I love that.
And then go back in.
Yeah,
that is great.
And I
feel like I need to adopt that.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, it's always like that act of trying to talk to yourself how you would talk to your friend, where it's like you've got the group text where your friends are like, my book is terrible, nothing, it doesn't work, it won't work, and you know what you would say to them, which is like, you're an incredible writer, like this is going to work out, you don't need to worry.
Exactly. I think that was part of my thing, as I feel like I'm better. I've been better at being positive, like to others, and needing it to like shine some of that on me. So hence the mantras all over the wall. There's another question from Alexandra. Thanks for joining us. Alexandra, she says, Emily, I'm such a big fan of your books, and she just finished People We Meet on Vacation. Yay, it's so awesome. Your humor is so quick and witty, but completely natural. Some of the best I've ever read. I agree. Does the dialogue banter between your characters come easily to you when you're writing, or is it something you have to craft over time in the editing process?
Oh man, I'll be curious to hear both of your answers too for kind of how you tackle dialogue. I would say 85 to 90% of the time it happens really naturally, to the point that I'm constantly having to cut a lot of dialogue out, because it's like not doing anything other than letting the characters have a good time. Which is, you know, you can have some of that, but sometimes my editor is like, okay, this running joke is like 3 pages long. So it happens pretty naturally, but I've been trying so hard to figure out how to like teach it, because people ask about it a lot. And as far as I've gotten basically is just like watch a lot of TV, which is just generally good advice in life. And then also I think I rarely think of conversations as just like someone gently like passing information back and forth. And I think sometimes when you're aware that your dialogue needs to also be doing like heavy lifting for a story, it can become like about, you know, just kind of, I'm giving you information or asking you a question and you're giving me the exact answer to that question. And you have to think so much more about how, like, what characters are avoid talking about, how they deflect, if they, you know, how they handle serious situations, how they want other people to handle serious situations. And I feel like when I think about dialogue, it's much more of like either a tennis match or like tug of war, where it's like there just needs to be constant push or pull happening, where it's like you're not just going to be neatly passing information back and forth. You're reacting to that person in some way.
Yeah.
So I want to hear your answers too for how you approach dialogue.
Libby, you want to go?
Yeah, I actually really love the idea of thinking of it as either like a tennis match or a tug of war, because I think that's like a great way, because the whole exchange, like back and forth, can just be so not exciting, and there's so much more there. So I will say I embarrassingly like write my books out loud. So I don't know if anyone does this, but I could not coffee shop it, because people would be like, what is that weirdo doing?
I do like my characters wave, and there are times where I've been like, what are you doing?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. My husband calls my reading and writing face like my empathy face, where it's like I like murmur it under my breath, but much worse is I like make the facial expressions of what the character is feeling, and it's horrible.
So I definitely do that, and I feel like that kind of, I don't know, helps with it being more natural, I think, because I'm kind of like playing both parts in the conversation. But I sometimes I feel like dialogue for me is hard, and probably this really goes back to imposter syndrome a bit, because I'm just like, I'm not that cool of a person to talk to. Like, I mean,
I'm not funny, so
so it's like that. I'll have those moments where I'm reading dialogue. Like, I always think your dialogue just is so funny, but I'm also like, she just in real life must be very cool, because these people are, or like, or I thought this, I don't know if y'all have read Dial A for Aunties by Jessie.
So funny.
So like, it's hilarious. And in real life, she is hilarious. So in my mind, I'm like, there's this connection. But for me, it's more like I'm trying it out loud and like going through it. I think more like playing a scene, I guess. And like that kind of goes back to the television thing, because I feel like that's a lot of the times that's where I pick up, you know, if it's not how I would say it, like it's still sort of natural or those kind of things. But yeah, I don't really have an exciting process. It's just me looking ridiculous.
I think that's so relatable though. I really get that, like feeling like you're playing out the scene, and it sounds like we all do, which is funny because I don't think every writer is like that, but apparently all three of us are.
I read it out loud a lot to hear what it sounds like, you know, like the dialogue. I'm not very funny either, so like I've when Kensington said that, you know, they were that the Keys to Love series was like coming, they were going to put in trade back, you know, because rom-coms were in trade. I was like, oh, I don't know if you know, and they said, you know, like humorous, emotional stories. And really in my next email was like, well, I don't think my readers come to me for humor, but emotion, sure. Because I feel like if there's, you know, if there's humor in there, then it just has come out of the character. Me trying hard to be in the character's voice, because I don't feel like Priscilla, is a funny person, you know, I'm bantering kind of person in real life either. So if it's there, I'm just so I think that's the advice I would kind of give, like with dialogue, is just always try to make sure you, the author, aren't getting in the way of the character. And the more you can like crawl inside the character and the way you're describing whatever it is that they see, you know, because all three of us could walk into the same room, but we're going to notice different things and we're going to describe it different ways, right? So but I do have to say, Emily, the next time I'm sitting on the couch watching TV, I'm going to be like, this is totally work. I'm working right now.
Yeah.
I'm studying dialogue.
On my taxes, I write off my Netflix subscription, which is like not that much money, but because I genuinely do think that is part of the job. I think it's really helpful. And it's, you know, it's interesting because book dialogue is not the same thing as TV or movie dialogue, just like those aren't the same thing as real life dialogue. You don't need to add every and like to your sentences if you don't choose to. But yeah, I think it does count. I think anytime you're absorbing story in any way, it kind of like just needles into your brain, and while you're sleeping, gets implanted in, you know, how you approach things.
Well, one of the exercises, honestly, that we talk about I have like an online romance writing class. It's a continuing education class for Ed to Go. But when we're in the section, in one of the lessons, we talk about like watch a TV show and mute it so that you can watch their, you know, their emotion, their facial expressions, the actions, you know, that kind of stuff, and then rewatch it, or if you can, you know, like if it's on DVR or whatever, or watch something else, whatever. But then, you know, just not watching it, but listening to the dialogue, so you can hear like the pauses that, you know, you can to kind of work on that. So I do that every once in a while, but I hadn't really, the way you just said it, like watch a lot of TV. I'm like, yes. I'm going to say Emily Henry told me to
I gave
watch
you
a lot of
permission.
TV.
I really do think it's solid advice. Watch TV whose dialogue you think is good. I mean, that's helpful.
Yeah.
But also what you were saying, Pris, about like how if all three of us walked into the same room, we describe it differently. That's another great writing exercise too. If you're trying to figure out how your characters would talk, doing that with individual characters and noticing like what would this person notice versus this person. And you can do the same thing even with mood, where it's like, I remember a writing exercise in college that was like, go into this, we had like a chapel on campus. It was like, go into the chapel and write a scene and set if you were like hiding or running from something, or if you were there kind of like grieving, or if you were there like on a wedding day. It's like, you have to remember that a place is in a setting, and all of that, all those details are sort of meaningless without like a lens that gives them meaning.
Like I think one of the exercises I say, like if there's, you know, someone needs to sit on the grass, if someone who is not an outdoorsy person, they're going to notice, oh, it's scratching me, you know, and right. But someone who loves being outdoors is going to lay on the grass and, you know, enjoy the scent of newly fresh grass, or the, you know, the dirt over here from, you know, they just planted flowers, whatever, you know. So same situation, but it's going to be described differently from two different, you know, people.
Yeah, that's really true in dialogue too, because it's like some people will be really forthcoming. There might be one issue they're excited to talk about, and someone else is totally avoiding it or trying to change the subject. So I feel like
I would imagine that you saw that with your.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying, sorry, there's like a slight lag, so I keep interrupting. I'm sorry. I was going to say, I imagine that was something that came into play a lot with the sisters that you're writing about, Libby. And also, I mean, same with Alejandro and Ana Maria, because all that history, anytime you're writing characters with history, what they say versus what they mean is going to be so loaded.
The subtext, that's what I was trying to think of when you were talking, Emily, before, you know, like people are going to say things, but is that what they really mean? Or so, you know, can you weave in a subtext based on the word choice, you know, kind of, you know.
That definitely was the case with mine, because there's a big secret between them throughout the book. And actually between a lot of the characters, I mean, there's people who are holding back their feelings and things that they know. And so there is a lot of stuff that goes unsaid. And so it's like those spaces in the conversation that almost become like as important as what's being said.
Oh yeah, totally. Anita, I think your last name is Learned or Learned. Anita's asking, how you control your time from going down too far or too many rabbit holes when doing research online. Yeah.
You
I don't
can't
know.
control time.
I was gonna say, I don't know about that. I do not do blood and guts, and I watch way too many hours of surgeries on YouTube like this, you know, for Alejandro. And there is no surgery in the book at all. It happened pre. But I just kind of, for me, it was like I felt like I needed to know what he went through to kind of know like why he's so pissed at the opening of the book, right? And you know, with his situation. But my sister, who is my main beta reader, did say, stop researching and start writing.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing is I don't feel like you can control time in any way. Like I feel like that's kind of like a slippery slope. I think especially when you're like an aspiring writer, because it's like you can start to feel like every minute that slips past you is like the minute that you need it. And that's so bad for us. We're humans and like we're just supposed to enjoy our time. But it's like you said, it's like sometimes you're really just avoiding writing. And I think deep down, you know, when you're avoiding writing.
Yeah.
Like when your house is suddenly spotless when you're on deadline and like you normally live in filth, you know what's going on.
Yeah. Yes.
True.
I think when it comes to research, it's at a point where if you can, you know, especially if you've got a contract and you have a deadline, right? But even if you're not writing to contract, you know, if you give yourself a deadline, like you want to finish, you know, or whatever, there comes a point where if you can start writing, right, you know, then you want to start writing, because you can always, like, there are times I'm in the middle of the book or a scene or something, and then I'm going, you know, to look again, hopefully not down a rabbit hole, but I'm going to look, you know, for something. But I think there's that fine line of knowing what you know, researching what you need to know so that you feel comfortable and, you know, writing this story as these people, right? As, you know, especially crawling inside your characters, if it's dual POV, you know, crawling in their heads and getting started, knowing that, you know, when you get to the end, especially of your first draft, you're always going to go back. You have revisions to go back in. And sometimes you need to just start writing so you can get a good feel to then really realize what you do need to go back and research a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's so true, because at the end of the day, the driver of the story is really the story itself and the characters and the emotional stakes and all of the research and things. Like, to me, that's kind of like the frosting. You don't necessarily need it at the beginning. You need to like get the core first. And so I feel like, I mean, I know everybody has a different process of like what works for them. And of course, like there's times that just your premise needs a lot of research, right? So you have to do it at the beginning. But not one of those situations. I think it, for me, usually research is an avoidance tactic because I'm feeling like nervous about getting started. But also, like, I think I tend to do better when I'm really immersed in the story, and like even just leaving a note like check this later or place name or whatever, and then just go back and do the research once you've got the groundwork laid. I think that's kind of like my tip for avoiding that rabbit hole, because it's very tempting to go down.
Yeah, I'll like highlight, I'll like put something in all caps, right, and then highlight it, because it could be easier to go research than to stay immersed in the scene.
I read somewhere, I don't know if it was in a writing book or someone had posted this in a blog, but they use like a word they would never use in the story, like elephant, and then they'll just search for those and find all the things that they needed to. Yeah, so I think I use like rhinoceros, but
I probably don't know how to spell rhinoceros. No.
Yeah, that would be my issue. I do like Command F and it'd be like, well, this word isn't anywhere in this. No, but to your point, Libby, it's like, yeah, my documents are absolutely riddled with comments. It's like, double check this. And even things that aren't research, but are just, I can't remember, like, if this conversation actually happened already and that kind of thing. Like, as I'm writing, I really do not go back when I'm drafting, which again, like, the caveat to all advice you will hear today is that you really do have to do whatever works for you. So you can try on any of our approaches and don't feel bad if they don't work for you. But for me, I write hard and fast when I'm doing a first draft. And so I do not go back and check things. I put a comment. I mean, my characters change ages throughout the books constantly. And sometimes that doesn't even really get fixed until copy edits, where copy editors like, this person was 34 in the beginning and they're 29 now. Like, how did this happen? But
I wanna
same thing for
know.
research. Yeah. We all want to know. We all need that answer. But yeah, so just it is okay to not. I mean, yeah, like you said, you need the big picture stuff so that you can build that story and know. But the little details, you can fill in a lot of that later if you're in need of that. If you don't want to be like using your time. And I will also say, again, this like cannot work for everyone, especially different life scenarios. But for me, I always try to do my writing first, like before. I mean, like in the daily allotted time
like
I
your
have.
daily plan.
Yes, because the other stuff, you know, it can go down a rabbit hole, but you also don't need as much energy, or at least I don't need as much energy to research as I need to draft. So drafting, like if I have done a ton of research and then I sit down to write, I'm probably not going to get much done because I feel like I've already used like my brain for the day.
Yeah. I think that's also true with one of the things, like I just took the Write Better Faster class, you know, by Becca Syme. And one of the things like, don't do, because I can be easily distracted, or like if there's a problem going on over here, even though I try to turn it off, when I come to my desk, I'm still thinking about, you know, whatever's going on. So trying not to do email or social media or just get in. I'll tell you, I will look at my email to see like, did something come in from my editor or agent that I need to respond to? But you know, if those names aren't there, then I'm closing it and trying to get started. Does that happen every day? No, especially not like when you have a book come out, right? You have to do promo, and it's hard promoing and like revising and writing at the same time, because then it's like a juggle.
Just emphatically agree with everything that you said, and that is why it's like, so honestly, sometimes my poor publicity team and editors have to deal with like, I'm replying to my email today for the week, so you've got 45 responses coming your way, and then I'll get back to you again in a week.
Let me see. Veronica asks, what do you do when you've plotted your story out, but once you start writing, the characters go in a different direction? Do you go with what you've plotted, or do you follow your characters? Who wants to take this one
Chris,
first?
I think you should start, since we know for a fact that you're a plotter, and so I'm really curious how your answer would be.
I am a plotter, and I'll tell you, I love start. I have an idea what the last scene's gonna look like, right? But is it a family reunion? Is it whatever? I will plot the scenes out probably about a third of the way, and then that way it silences those imposter syndrome doubts that are like, do you really know what you're doing? Are you sure you can write a book? Because I'm like, look, I got a map, now be quiet. However, as I start writing, if I come up, or if a character whispers in my ear, 9 out of 10 times that idea is better than what I thought of at the beginning, or that idea needs to happen before the scene I thought. And so 9.5 out of 10 times I'm going with that scene. I even like to, I'll write, I have like not post-its, like 3 by like note cards that have like the scene, it has whose point of view it is, and it says like the goal, conflict, and the disaster using the scene and sequel. And so I have one of those for every scene. And so there are times where it's tossed, or like the number I only write in pencil, because, oh my God, if it was in pen, then I would really feel like, so there are times where it has like a number 14 at the top. It's supposed to be scene number 14, and I'm erasing to change that because now it's become 16. Or because by then when that happens, usually I have a better feel for the story. More importantly, I have a better feel for the characters. So if they're telling me something, then I need to listen to them and get the author out of the way. So it will change based on that. What about you two?
Are you a plotter, Emily? I'm curious.
I am not a plotter.
Oh my gosh, that makes me so nervous.
Oh my gosh, it makes us all nervous, Chris. It's not a good time a lot of the time. But actually, you know, when you're talking about your note card system, the weird thing is I do the same thing, but I do it in my second draft. So my first draft is basically like a very long, very bad outline. Where I'm writing the book like it's a book, and then afterward I look at all those pieces and we'll write out the scenes and be like, okay, nothing happens in this scene, we don't need it, or this one really, like, we need this here. And I do the same exact thing. I number them, I rearrange them, and I work that way from a full first draft.
Okay.
But the question of like, what do we do when the characters kind of take over? Like, I so agree with everything you were saying, which is that like, that's the ideal scenario. Like you plan a book before you know your characters fully, usually. I mean, if you're planning, and I mean, I just don't know my characters really until I'm finished with the first draft, and then I fully understand them. But yeah, that's like what you want. You want to know the characters so well that you suddenly know they would make a different decision. And that's how you kind of know it's working. Or for me, that's how I know it's working, when it feels like, oh, I know what this person would do. And it's not like what I might have thought at the beginning, but it's what they would do. And that's a very exciting feeling to me.
Yeah, I feel like those are the magic moments, you know, where you're like, I've got where this is going next. I know exactly what would happen in this scene. And I feel like, so I've become a bit more of a plotter than I was when I first started writing. I used to just completely go in like with an idea, maybe, and like maybe an idea of one scene or something, but then I was just like stumbling around. And then I would patchwork it together like a quilt afterward, which I think my agent was very aware of when she was reading these things. But like now I you know, it's like when you're contracted, like I do, you know, I like to give my editor an idea of like how the book is going to be. So if there's something that she wants to like say, hey, this isn't going to work like this, she can kind of give me a heads up. So I have like kind of a basic outline, but I feel like for the most part, I end up not following it at all, even if it was like an outline that was a paragraph. Like my second book definitely does not match what I originally sent. And that was mostly because the more I got into it and really got to know the characters and they spoke more to me, then things happened and unfolded differently than I thought. But I think once I have a moment where I feel like, okay, I know what the character is going to do, and it's its own thing, it's not something that I preconceived, that's when I feel like the book is working. Because I'm like, it's taking on a life of its own versus me just writing based on what I thought should happen. So I feel like if that's happening for you, that's great. That's a good thing for sure.
And I can tell, like, there have been a couple of times I can tell where I'm still sticking to like what I want to do. Like there was a scene in Their Perfect Melody, and Lily has invited Diego home, and I was trying to write it, and it just was not, you know, really, I know they're not real, right? But I still had a conversation with Diego, basically like, what is going on? Like, how come? And him telling me, I don't think I would say that. I would do this. And he was right, right. And so then when I sat back down at my laptop and wrote it in the way that he told me, basically in here, right? That then it worked. But it was me sticking to like an idea that I had, and the author getting in the way, you know. And so when that's happening, for me, it works. Step away from the laptop, kind of like what we talked about before.
Yeah, for writer's block, right? Like I feel like sometimes the writer's block is that the story wants to do one thing and you want to do another thing, and they don't agree with each other, so you're sort of stuck.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And I think especially if you have kind of planned out, even just mentally kind of figured out where you think it's going, and then the characters start to pull it away, it can be very scary. It's funny because we're all sitting here being like, it's so great, we all love it, but it can be very scary if you're like, okay, so I know that this would happen differently, but then that changes the whole rest of the book. And maybe even what led up to it needs to change. And that's, you know, that's a scary position to be in, but you're, I think, always going to end up with a better book if you trust that feeling. But it can be really gutting, because sometimes you lose scenes that you were excited about, whatever. But you'll end up with a better book.
And I would say if it's a bigger scene, I mean, if it's a change that affects multiple scenes, then hopefully you have, you know, like I have close writer friends that I, you know, that I would brainstorm with and be like, oh man, look, this is kind of come up, and what do you think? You know, so like if you need that, if you know, if that will help you to kind of bounce that idea off of, if it makes you feel a little bit better, you know, if it is like a major change that's going to affect the book. I think we just got one more question. It's 12:55. But let's see, we'll take one more question, and then I know this was lunchtime, so we don't want to take up too much of everybody's time, but Kakayo, I'm hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. What do you do when you reach a point in the story that feels impossible to get past? It's not quite wholly writer's block, but it's like, what now?
Mm,
Ah.
so scary.
I know.
Yeah. Well, I think to me, when I was saying, every day kind of feels like writer's block to me,
Mhm.
that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about
Right.
that feeling of what now. And
Mhm.
again, this cannot work for everyone, but for me, like if you have reached that point and you've kind of walked away from it and you've tried all the other tricks you can find and you've given it time and space and you've gone off and seen friends, everything that you can do, I really think that's when you get to the point of I'm just going to write anyway. And that's what I was saying, where
Yeah.
it's like, send your characters to the grocery store, send them on a walk. Maybe your characters don't live in a world where there's a grocery store. I don't know, but
Yeah.
sometimes you have to just write them doing nothing. And like, really, I will put my phone on do not disturb. I'll turn off my Wi-Fi. I'll go outside, whatever. And I will make sure there are no other options for things for me to do
Mhm.
except to sit and write. And I will just write really boring scenes. But eventually, if I just keep forcing myself to go, like to just write, eventually I would say 9 times out of 10 will hit on something where it's like, oh, this is a scene, this will happen. And again, like later I'll cut out all of that connective tissue that wasn't necessary. But sometimes it is just proving to yourself you can write when you feel like you can't because you don't have any ideas. Really, I genuinely feel that almost every single day while I'm drafting. Like the beginning, the first 20,000 words are great. And then at that point, it's like,
I'm like, what are they doing? Yeah.
That's
how do you write a book?
The spot. That is the spot.
Yeah.
What you were talking about, Emily, reminds me, Nora Roberts is like famous for saying like, you can't edit or revise a blank page. So just like put your butt in a chair and write. I think I also try to think of like, okay, what just happened? Right? Was it a major scene? Like what happened at the end of that scene? Like, should they be moving in some direction? Are they stalled, for some reason? Or have I been in their head for too long and nothing has been happening? So then I need to take a step back and see like, what are they thinking about in their head? Like what action can happen to create a scene, to move the story forward. So, you could, that could be it, but then again, I'm not saying don't go back to like start revising because that's an issue, right? And then you never get to the end. You want to make sure that you're getting to the end. But if you need to like last, through that road, what happened there and what can either make that worse, what can extend that, what can make them go in a different direction, and then whichever one you come up with, start writing, like Emily said.
Yeah, I do 2 things. One is I go back to the beginning and read through, but I'm not allowed to touch anything I've written.
Nice.
So just to get back into the story and see if something feels natural, like sometimes that momentum can help me. And the other thing that I do is very similar to what Emily was saying. I just try stuff on like it's an outfit. It's like you're going to a big event and you're like, I have nothing to wear. This is a disaster. It's like once I start trying stuff on, then I'm like, wait a minute, I have that black dress. So I feel like if you try on some different things, you might find, okay, this doesn't quite work, but it gave me an idea.
Right.
So like those are my 2 kind of go-to things that I try.
Yeah,
So maybe
that's
something.
great. Well, and also back to Chris's point, I think if you don't know like a thing that you can make happen to complicate things, I think and also to Libby's point of rereading, you have to figure out what your character needs, what they desperately need or desperately want. And then you either give them a chance to kind of grasp for it, or you put a new obstacle in the way. And I think, like an easy thing, I think, so for people we meet on vacation, for example, like everything that happens only really matters in that book because Poppy desperately wants to fix her friendship with Alex. So like making things go wrong that make this trip feel worse, or making her make a joke that he responds to kind of weird, just like little things that don't feel like that big of actions, but the whole point is she really, really wants something. So these little things are obstacles that she has to overcome. So giving what, Chris has been talking about, goal, motivation, conflict. That's what that means. It's like give your character a goal and a reason they really need that thing, and then block that thing at every turn.
And even if they get a little bit of it, oftentimes there's like a yes, but, right? So there is something that they didn't realize that either, that complicates it, or it's weightier, or it affects them in a way that they didn't, anticipate, as they're moving forward. So I think that I don't see any more questions. So it's almost time to wrap up. Do you want to anyone to say any last closing remarks about your books or anything? So like Libby, you said your next one's coming out March, but you can now get Meet Me in Paradise. Print, audio, and digital.
Yep.
And you have Emily's People We Meet on Vacation. I think there were links in the chat for anybody who's interested.
Yes.
And mine, I didn't say anything about it, but I had Anchored Hearts came out in May, and then I'm in an anthology that's set in New York City. So you can head to Key West, and then you can jet up to New York City for a blackout and see what happens in those three. And then Sarah said it was okay for me to say real quickly, if you are an e-reader, some people prefer digital copies, like they can make the print bigger. Anchored Hearts is on sale just this week, so a couple more days.
Get it. It's so sweet and swoony. Make sure you get it if you don't have it.
Well,
really
I would
wonderful.
say get all of ours. Get all of ours, and then I hope you're heading to the beach or to the pool, or you're comfy in the AC inside somewhere, and reading all of our books. But we just want to say thank you so much for coming today. It's time to wrap things up, and we really appreciate you joining us here. Also, please check the website for the Virginia Festival of the Book. They have a ton of great events. You can catch old recordings or see what's up ahead on the schedule. I think I messed up that thing. It says, well, we hope you'll also check out the future virtual events of the Virginia Festival of the Books, and you can go to vabook.org. Other than that, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Happy reading.